What if everything they told you about strength was wrong? You've heard it before. You're too sensitive. You care too much. Stop being so emotional. But here's the truth they never expected you to uncover. What if your softness isn't your flaw, but your greatest weapon? There's a quiet power inside you, waiting. It doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It simply is steady, deep, and real. And that's exactly why it's so misunderstood and feared. You've been taught to hide it, shrink it, toughen up. But what if that conditioning was never about your well-being? What if it was about control? Because here's the secret most people miss. Your softness isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's courage. It's the one thing they never see coming, and the one thing they can't defend against. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll never look at your softness the same way again. You're just too sensitive. 3 words that feel more like a sentence than a statement. You've heard them, haven't you? Maybe it came from a teacher when you cried too easily, or a friend when you brought up something that mattered to you a little too much. Maybe it came from someone you loved, someone who didn't know how to sit with the fullness of your emotion, so they labeled it instead. Too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional, too much. You've felt it, haven't you? That sting of being dismissed just for feeling deeply, as if your ability to feel, to truly care, was somehow a flaw you needed to correct. From an early age, especially if you're a woman, you were likely taught to edit yourself. Don't cry. Don't speak unless you're sure. Don't show too much of anything. Smile even when it hurts. Be nice. Be agreeable. Be strong, but never soft. What they didn't tell you is that this wasn't about being strong. It was about being small. Because in this world, softness threatens systems. Empathy challenges control. Presence makes people look inward, and that's uncomfortable. So instead, society hands you a mask. Carl Jung called this the persona, the face you wear to meet the world. Not who you are, but who you're expected to be. For many women, that mask becomes a carefully managed performance. Pleasant, polished, and palatable. Strong, but not too strong. Caring, but not inconvenient. Emotional, but only in ways that make others feel safe. Behind that mask, your true self starts to fade. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer feels welcome. You know that feeling, don't you? The quiet exhaustion of holding back tears in meetings. The way your voice trembles when you try to speak your truth. Because part of you still wonders if your truth is too much. And the worst part? You begin to believe it. You start to think maybe they're right. Maybe you are too much. Maybe your softness is the problem. So you harden. You pull back. You shapeshift. You trade tenderness for performance, empathy for distance. You silence yourself to be taken seriously, but something in you still aches. Because you were never meant to live disconnected from your softness. Your softness is not fragility. It is water, yes, it flows, but it also carves through mountains. It adapts, but it never loses its essence. It nourishes, but it can flood. It is underestimated because it is quiet. But quiet does not mean weak. It means deep. When was the first time you were told to toughen up? Can you remember how it felt in your body? Did it make you stronger, or did it make you shrink? Maybe you built walls. Maybe you learned how to be cool instead of present. Maybe you tried to feel less, care less, want less, just to be more accepted. But here's what they didn't teach you, what they never wanted you to realize. There is a kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice. A kind of presence that doesn't need armor to be impenetrable. A kind of strength that whispers instead of shouts and still shakes the room. The truth is, what you've been told to hide is actually your most disarming power. You weren't too much. You were just around people who were not ready for your depth. And that's not your fault, but it is your moment to stop apologizing, to reclaim the parts of you that were labeled too emotional, too intense, too soft, because those parts, the ones you've been dimming, are exactly where your power lives. Not the kind of power that crushes, the kind that transforms, the kind that can't be predicted or controlled, because it doesn't come from force, it comes from truth. And once you stop running from that truth, everything changes. So, what if your softness is not your weakness, but your invitation to a different kind of strength? What if they never saw it coming because you never fully let it in? That's where we go next. Into the heart of your softness and the secret strength it's been holding all along. They say softness is weakness. But have you ever seen a storm surrender to the sky? The winds rage, the clouds darken, the world holds its breath, and still, the sky receives it all. Open, vast, unshaken. That is softness, and that is power. We live in a world that worships control, directness, precision, the kind of power you can measure and name. But there is another kind of power, one not built to conquer, but to connect. One that does not shout, but listens. One that does not force its way through the world, but changes it simply by being fully present within it. That is the essence of the feminine archetype. Not female, not male feminine. A quality of energy, not anatomy. It is receptive, intuitive, nurturing. It bends without breaking. It speaks without needing to be loud. It feels deeply, then moves through the world with a quiet certainty. You've felt it before. Maybe in a moment when you comforted someone with nothing more than your silence and presence. Maybe when your instincts told you the truth long before logic could explain it. Maybe when you forgave not because you were weak, but because you were wise enough to let go. Carl Jung believed that every human being holds both masculine and feminine energy. He called them the animus and anima, the inner opposites. But here's the catch. In a culture that rewards masculine traits like domination and control, the feminine within us, especially within women, is often undervalued or suppressed. We are told that, to succeed, we must be sharper, harder, colder, less emotional, more strategic, less heart, more mind. But this belief, this conditioning is not strength, it's survival. True strength is the ability to be fully yourself in a world that insists you be someone else. So let's be clear, softness is not the absence of strength. It is the expression of strength in its most transformative form. Compassion is not passivity. It's power that chooses peace over ego. Intuition is not irrationality. It's intelligence that speaks before words exist. Presence is not submission. It's influence that needs no dominance to lead. Think of softness like a blade hidden in silk. It moves with grace. It never announces itself. But when the moment demands, it cuts through illusion with clarity that shocks those who underestimated it. Let me tell you a story. A woman I once worked with, let's call her Lila, was in a meeting where tensions were high. A deal was about to fall apart. Voices were raised. Blame was thrown. And in the middle of it all, Lila did something radical. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend. She simply waited. She let the chaos spiral until it burned itself out. And then, in the quiet, she spoke gently, slowly, with warmth in her tone and steadiness in her body. She named what no one else could. Not the logistics of the conflict, but the emotional truth beneath it. Fear, insecurity, miscommunication. Her words didn't dominate the room, but they shifted it. The deal went through. Not because she won, but because she understood. That is the secret power of softness. It changes the room not by overpowering it, but by holding space for truth to emerge. And chances are, you've done this too. Maybe you just didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the moment you stayed calm when everyone else panicked. Maybe it was how you stayed kind when someone lashed out. Maybe it was the way your presence alone gave someone else permission to breathe. Has your softness ever saved you or someone else? Think about that. You may not even realize the power you hold, because the world rarely gives softness credit. It calls it luck, or coincidence, or timing, anything but strength. But deep down, you know better. You've felt it, that quiet knowing in your chest, that moment when you chose not to harden, when you let yourself feel, and because of that, something shifted. Maybe not right away, maybe not in a way others noticed, but something real, something human. And isn't that what we're all craving? Something real in a world of masks and noise. The truth is, you don't have to fight like them to win. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to be hard to survive. Your softness is not your armor. It is your edge. It's the one thing they never saw coming, and it's been with you all along. So the next time you're told you're too emotional, too sensitive, too much, pause. Feel the storm rise inside you. And remember the sky. It's not just others who are afraid of your softness. Sometimes you are too. There's a part of you that learned, long ago, that feeling deeply wasn't safe. That to survive, you had to shut the door on certain parts of yourself, your tears, your tenderness, your truth. You didn't do it because you were weak. You did it because you were wise. Because your body knew, before your mind did, that in a world that misunderstood softness, staying open came with a cost. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or disown because we believe they're not acceptable. And here's the twist. Your shadow isn't just the ugly or the broken. Sometimes, your shadow is your beauty, your empathy, your intuition, your inner light. Imagine a little girl with her heart in a glass box, not because she's fragile, but because she's aware. She knows that her tenderness is valuable, even sacred, so she hides it, buries it deep, only letting the world see the version of her that feels safe to be. She learns how to be pleasing, how to be quiet, how to keep herself small enough to avoid becoming a target. Over time, the glass box becomes her prison. She grows up. She achieves. She does everything right. From the outside, she looks strong, capable, put together. But inside, there's a silence she can't explain, a loneliness that success cannot fill. And sometimes, when the noise dies down, she hears it, that soft, aching voice within her that says, "This isn't who you really are." You may know someone like this. Or maybe that someone is you. I once knew a woman who built her life around control. She was the one who always had the plan, the answers, the calm in the chaos. But she was also exhausted, burned out from holding everything together. Her smile never reached her eyes. Her body was there, but her soul felt distant. Then one day, something broke. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was subtle something someone said that hit too close, a memory she hadn't let herself feel in years. And for the first time, she didn't push it away. She let it rise. The tears came, and she didn't fight them. That night, she told me, I didn't know how numb I had become until I finally let myself feel again. It was her softness, not her strength, that saved her. Not because it fixed everything, but because it reconnected her to herself. The self she had locked away to be accepted, to be successful, to be safe. And from that moment on, she lived differently. She still showed up. She still got things done. But now, there was breath in her voice. There was warmth in her presence. And there was truth in her eyes. Because here's what no one tells you. What you hide becomes your prison. What you embrace becomes your superpower. When you reject your softness, you lose the part of you that feels, that connects, that knows. And when that part is missing, even the brightest moments can feel hollow. But when you welcome it back, when you stop apologizing for your tenderness, your intuition, your heart, you return to yourself. Yes, it's scary. Being fully seen always is. But the freedom, the peace that comes from no longer pretending, that's the real reward. So I'll ask you this. What part of you have you been hiding just to be accepted? And what if that part, the one you've kept in the shadows, is exactly where your magic lives? Because maybe your softness isn't what holds you back. Maybe it's the key to everything you've been trying to become. There comes a day when you're just done pretending. Not because the world gave you permission to stop, but because the mask you've been wearing starts to suffocate you more than it protects you. One morning, one moment, one breath, you realize you can't keep performing. You can't keep bending yourself into shapes that don't feel like home. And honestly, you don't want to anymore. That's where real change begins. Up until now, maybe you've lived for approval, for the good girl praise, for the illusion of safety that comes from staying small and agreeable. You learned to read the room before you read your own heart. You measured your words, your tone, even your tears, to make sure no one else felt uncomfortable. You kept the peace, but at the cost of your own. But something inside you is waking up. Something ancient and undeniable. The part of you that knows. You were never meant to be a performance. You were meant to be. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's the slow, beautiful unraveling of false identities so that your truest self can emerge not as an idea, but as a way of living. I used to think strength meant being unshakable, stoic, a fortress no one could crack. Now I know better. Now I know strength means being real. It means having the courage to cry in front of people who don't understand you. It means saying no, even when your voice shakes. It means standing soft, but unmovable. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've finally stopped abandoning yourself. Can you picture it? You, letting the tears come without apology. Not because you're breaking, but because you're healing. You saying, "I don't agree," without needing to explain why. You, choosing rest over hustle, choosing truth over performance, choosing you, over and over again, not from arrogance, but from wholeness. This is not weakness. This is radical defiance in a world that glorifies numbness. We're taught to disconnect, to power through, to keep smiling even when our souls are begging for rest. But what if the most powerful thing you could do was to feel? To stay with yourself even in the messy parts. Self-compassion is not indulgent. It's revolutionary. Because when you stop tearing yourself apart for being too emotional, too sensitive, too whatever, you begin to realize those very things you judged were signs of life. Signs that you are still in here, still connected, still whole. Beneath it all, you're not fragile. You're forged in feelings. That's a strength most people can't even comprehend. They've been conditioned to believe that strength looks like grit, force, domination. And yes, those have their place. But your strength is subtler, deeper. It shows up in presence, in softness that doesn't flinch, in boundaries that don't require walls. And the most beautiful part? The more you own who you are, the more the world adjusts around you. It won't always be easy. Some people may fall away. Some might not understand. But that's okay. Because you'll be too grounded to keep shrinking just to fit someone else's comfort zone. This is your awakening. Not a grand explosion, not a lightning bolt, but a steady remembering, a coming home, a rising from within. You don't have to fight for your power. You just have to reclaim it. It was never outside of you. It was in the way you love, the way you see the world, the way your presence softens the air in the room. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You just need to trust that being fully, deeply, unapologetically you is enough. And the truth is, it always was. Softness? It's the one thing most men never see coming. Not because they're unkind, not because they're incapable, but because they've been raised just like you in a culture that rarely shows them what softness actually looks like when it's powerful. They're taught to anticipate a fight, a wall, a reaction. They're taught to brace themselves for resistance or a performance. But what they're not prepared for, what catches them completely off guard, is a woman who is grounded, emotionally attuned, and unapologetically real. That's the kind of presence that doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't posture, it doesn't manipulate, and it sure doesn't pretend. It simply is. And that's why it's so disarming. You've seen it before, maybe you've even lived it. The moment when a room full of tension softens because someone chose connection over control. The moment when a man expecting confrontation is met with quiet clarity instead. The moment when the softest voice in the room says the hardest truth and no one dares interrupt her. This isn't about playing games. It's not about using femininity to charm or seduce. It's about what happens when you stop hiding behind emotional armor and begin embodying who you really are. When a woman fully inhabits her softness, not the version of it shaped to please others, but the kind that rises from within it, challenges every assumption about what power is supposed to look like. She doesn't need to out-argue anyone. She doesn't need to prove a point. Her strength is felt, not forced. And the truth is, that kind of woman is often labeled as intimidating, or mysterious, or enchanting. But let's be honest, those are just words people use when they don't know how to describe authenticity. See, we live in a world that expects women to either perform softness or suppress it, to be either delicate and digestible or hardened and detached. But when you step outside that binary, when you show up fully, with your heart intact and your boundaries firm, you rewrite the rules. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer playing a part. And that makes you powerful in a way that can't be rehearsed, replicated, or ignored. I knew a woman once who sat across from her partner in the middle of an argument that had been building for weeks. He came in defensive, ready to be blamed, ready to fight. But she didn't match his energy. She didn't escalate. She didn't shrink either. She simply said, "I'm not here to win. I'm here to tell the truth." And she did. Calmly. Clearly. She told him how his distance hurt her, how she was tired of pretending it didn't. And then she stayed. She didn't run from the silence. She didn't demand an answer. She just let the truth land where it needed to. That moment changed everything. Not because she overpowered him, but because her presence left no room for anything but truth. That's the paradox of softness. The unarmored woman is the most dangerous, not because she's trying to destroy, but because she's no longer trying to win. She has nothing to prove. And because of that, she has everything to offer. This is not the softness you've been sold. It's not weakness dressed up as grace. It's not silence pretending to be peace. This is softness that holds truth. That leads. That dares to be seen fully. So let me ask you something. How would your world change if you stopped using your softness as a shield and started using it as a sword? Not a sword to harm, but a sword to cut through the noise. Through the performative, the performanced, and the pressure to be anything other than you. Because softness, when it's real, doesn't make you smaller. It makes you unstoppable.